How early is early when we say he's coming back?
Well, he's coming back this evening rather than tomorrow morning. The original plan was an overnight flight tonight, which is always very tiring. And of course, he now has to make the statement to the House of Commons tomorrow, so clearly he needs a bit more time to prepare that statement and probably to get a good night's sleep, because we have been flying around a lot and not getting a huge amount of sleep.
Let's talk to our correspondent, Glen Oglaza, who's in Deauville. Glen, bring us up to date about developments concerning Libya there.
Well, first of all, they've issued a communique taking the decision on the Arab Spring generally to massively support Egypt and Tunisia, whose prime ministers are here, along with the Arab League, whose Secretary General is here, to the tune of an eye-watering $20 billion. Now, just to put that into context, because it is a huge amount, Egypt says it needs $12 billion just to stabilise its economy for the rest of the year.
More on this from our political correspondent, Glen Oglaza. Now, he's live in Westminster tonight. Have those questions from the opposition been answered, Glenn?
Well, the government's got itself an escape clause, really, because they're saying they're going to consult with the mortgage industry before they actually launch this scheme. But Downing Street's been making it pretty clear that there is no ban on people owning second homes. The example they're giving is if parents want to help their children, so they can get the interest-free loan in order to get those children onto the housing ladder, and that should not be impeded. And I think generally the principle of this will be popular because it helps the construction industry, gives it a fillip, which it needs, but also gets more people to own their own homes, and that will prove popular. I think the concern is, as you heard Ed Ball saying there, that it can be open to abuse.
Sky's Glen Oglaza has this report.
At this regional newspaper in Belfast, journalists are finessing the next edition as industry leaders prepare to meet government ministers, including the Prime Minister, to sort out how they are to be regulated. And the campaign representing victims of phone hacking attracts tens of thousands of signatures to its petition demanding a new law.
What the press are calling for, and what the Prime Minister seems to have accepted, is the right of free speech for media barons, and huge corporations, treading all over the rights and interests of the public to be told the truth, and individuals, often vulnerable individuals, not to have their lives destroyed. That isn't acceptable.
OK, look forward to reading that.
In Belfast, they disagree. One thing Lord Justice Leveson wants to abolish is off-the-record briefings, something newspapers rely on.
There's a real danger of what this will do to crime reporting. Crime reporters' bread and butter are off-the-record briefings, and the term off-the-record has been about for decades, if not hundreds of years. So, I think it's a bit ludicrous to say, oh, we will ban the words off the record as such. And I think as well, we are already starting to see a chill factor among the police forces across the UK in how they deal with journalists. And the number of briefings and the guidance being given is reducing on a weekly basis.
Harry Potter author J.K. Rowling gave evidence to Leveson. She too thinks David Cameron has got it wrong. "I am alarmed and dismayed," she says in a statement, "that the Prime Minister appears to be backing away from assurances he made at the outset of the Leveson inquiry. Without statutory underpinning, Leveson's recommendations will not work. We will be left with yet another voluntary system from which the press can walk away. I am merely one among many who feel duped and angry." So why does Leveson matter? It doesn't affect the price of bread or the cost of your energy, but there are vital principles at stake, principles of democratic accountability and freedom of the press. And David Cameron's problem is that he's heavily outnumbered. He has ranged against him the Labour Party, probably the Liberal Democrats, and dozens of his own MPs who want a new law to underpin press regulation. After 7 commissions or inquiries into the press in less than 70 years, Lord Justice Leveson seems determined that this time something has got to change.
Let me talk to Glenn now, who's in Westminster. Glenn, the Prime Minister does seem to be treading a pretty fine line, considering, on the face of it, he looks outnumbered, but his mind does seem made up.
Well, it does, although Downing Street have said that he is not completely closed-minded to the idea of some kind of legal underpinning. But his issue with this is twofold, as he said in the House of Commons. First of all, on principle, there is a danger that a future government could amend laws, a less benign government could exercise more control over the press than is intended.
What can we expect from him today?
Well, Downing Street aren't sure yet, to be honest, exactly what's going to happen today. I think we can fairly safely assume there will be a meeting of Cobra. And of course, the Prime Minister will be getting the military assessments of what has happened so far in the military action, how successful the strikes have been. This is what a government U-turn looks like. Here was George Osborne delivering his budget in March.
I regard tax evasion and indeed aggressive tax avoidance as morally repugnant.
And here's the Chancellor today announcing a screeching handbrake U-turn.
Well, we are going to cap the amount of income tax relief that wealthy people can claim, but we're not going to cap it if they're giving money to charity. So we've listened to charities, and any kind of cap would have potentially damaged donations to charities, so we're not going to do that.
Charities say half of their money comes from the top 7% of donors. The Charities Aid Foundation led a campaign by more than 1,000 charities to get the government to think again.
We believe it would have cost charities up to £500 million every single year. At a time of austerity, at a time of recession, when charities are being called on to deliver more but with less income, that would have been a hammer blow to many charities.
This is yet another budget U-turn. Just this week we've seen the retreat over VAT on pasties and the cut in VAT on caravans.
The government have done the right thing in announcing this U-turn, but it's the third U-turn in a week, more than 30 U-turns so far by this government, and it just shows what a shambles the budget back in March was.
They may be putting up the Jubilee bunting here in Downing Street, but George Osborne's got little to celebrate. The original idea was to crack down on tax avoidance, reclaiming money due to the Treasury. But many Tories were unhappy because they felt that this measure flew in the face of the concept of the big society. Now the U-turn is going to cost the government between £50 and £100 million a year.
The problem was the proposal, as it was rushed through into the budget, actually became a sledgehammer to crack a nut, and it was catching lots of genuine charitable giving. I don't think that was necessarily thought through.
Some Conservatives blame Nick Clegg, saying this was part of his so-called tycoon tax. But it is George Osborne's reputation as the Conservatives' master political strategist that continues to be damaged by a budget the opposition has labelled an omni-shambles. Glen Oglaza, Sky News, Westminster.